Hello. I'd like to talk to you today about the issue of gambling in the UK and particularly problems related to online gambling in the UK. But first of all, let's look at why we gamble at all. There are a number of reasons. First of all, it's a fairly natural human trait to want to get a reward for little effort, and gambling is something that offers that opportunity. Secondly, it's also exciting. You get a buzz when you win, and that is something that you want to experience again and again. There's also a social aspect to gambling. It's something that you do with other people. You gather together to play cards, to go to the horse races, to go to a bingo hall, and that's an important aspect. Gambling also offers the possibility to escape from one's day-to-day life for a few moments. And another reason people gamble, I think particularly these days, is because the media sometimes portray gambling as being rather sophisticated. Just think of James Bond in his tuxedo wandering into a casino and throwing down some chips on the roulette. There's an image of gambling that's perhaps more sophisticated than it deserves to be. Now, what do we gamble on in the UK? Well, I want to make a distinction between two different types of gambling. First of all, offline and online. So, offline gambling, which has obviously been around for considerably longer, is made up of the following types of events that people will gamble on. Horse racing. Now, this is the type of gambling that has the longest tradition in the UK. Indeed, it was the Romans that introduced horse racing to the UK when they occupied Britain in the 1st and 2nd centuries. There's also documented evidence of horse racing around 1200, so in the Middle Ages, and England already had a jockey club that was setting the rules for horse racing and gambling in 1750. Another sport that people traditionally like to bet on offline, so an event that they go to in order to bet, is the dog racing. And of course, dog racing always means greyhound racing, not just any dogs. Then we have fruit machines, or slot machines as they're called in the US. And this is often the way that young people, children, will get into gambling, through slot machines. Recently we've seen the rise of something called the fixed odds betting terminal. And I'll say a bit more about that because it really has all the characteristics of online betting rather than offline, but they exist offline as well. We have casinos, that's offline, and then lotteries and bingo. And interestingly, lotteries and bingo are classified by the Gambling Commission in the UK as soft gambling, considerably less likely to cause addiction, problem behaviour, or compulsive gambling. Another very British point of interest when it comes to offline gambling is that there were class differences, as there are with so many things in the UK. And so in the past, 16th, 17th, 18th century, you would find the rich gambling on horse racing, and perhaps even card games between friends, whereas the poor might just be playing dice or coin-based games with one another as a form of gambling. Let's look now at online gambling, because you can gamble on all of the events that I've just mentioned, the offline events, online. But the particularly popular forms of online gambling are poker, roulette, sports betting, so things like horse racing and dog racing, and something called in-play betting. And I'll come back to that in a moment. So, with the rise of the internet, there has been a shift from offline betting to online betting. And this is something that does bring with it problems. In 2010, online betting was 25% of the total gross gambling yield in the UK. The gross gambling yield is essentially the amount of money that bookmakers receive minus the winnings that they pay out, but before they pay for their operating costs and their tax. And in 2010, online betting, and the online gross gambling yield was £2 billion from a total where offline betting was 8 billion, so a quarter. In 2018, offline betting had risen to 14 billion pounds, online betting to 5 billion, so that's 35%. So you can see that the share of the market is shifting towards online betting. And indeed, the UK market is now the largest regulated online betting market in the world. There are 36 million betting accounts with licensed betting operations, and they are held by approximately 10 million people. Why has online betting then taken off? Well, first of all, you have the extension of broadband to pretty much every household. Betting companies will now actually be able to live stream events so as to facilitate betting on those events. And that's seen a lot more people betting on sporting events online. Of course, we also have the rise of the smartphone. Everybody has a smartphone, and that means that you can gamble anywhere, anytime. You also have access to your bank on your smartphone, which means that you have more rapid access to money with which to bet at any time. The internet also reaches more people than traditional in situ betting has done, and it's brought in a lot more people and different types of people to betting. And then we have sports sponsorship. Online bookmakers are very, very present in the sports world, and you'll see their names emblazoned on the football shirts of some of the top clubs in the UK. Another reason that online betting has become so successful is slightly less obvious and a little bit more underhand. The companies have little tricks to pull people in and to get them to bet more. For example, they will offer you free money. What happens is that when you sign up, for example, to join an online betting club, you might put down £50 and they will triple it and give you 150 to start with. Alternatively, they will let you play with free money. And what's interesting there is that the odds are different for the game that you're playing, and so you might well win whilst you're playing with virtual money, not real money. But then when you start to put down real money stakes, the odds will change back into the favour of the bookmaker, and you'll end up losing money. Companies will also offer VIP accounts to people who do a lot of betting. They will get special rates, they'll get special offers, and they'll be offered loans so they can bet more, and that's a particularly insidious little trick. There are also two big types of betting that have taken off in the last 10 or 15 years, and they're very much linked to online betting. One is spot betting. So that basically means betting on one particular type of event within a larger event. So for example, you could bet £10 on a given footballer like Lionel Messi scoring the first goal in a match, or you could bet on him scoring at some stage during the match. That's called a spot bet. And then you have in-play betting, which is basically being able to make bets whilst the match is going on. Traditionally, as soon as the match had started, all bets were off. You could not put down a new bet once the horse race, the dog race, or the football match had started. Now you can bet whilst the game is on. That offers an interactivity that really draws people in. That can also cause problems. And particularly insidious is that the gambling betting companies are also running games that have betting or gambling-like features in the game, and particularly designed to attract children towards gambling. For example, the loot box feature in some games is very much like gambling, and is going to attract children and young people to online gambling later. So what problems does this prevalence of online gambling pose? It certainly creates more addiction, and unfortunately that addiction hits two categories particularly hard. Young people, as I've said, because they're a little bit more susceptible to the tricks that the companies are building into their betting software. And the working class. This comes back to the difference that I mentioned earlier between the well-off and the less well-off. People with less money can be more seriously affected, not only by the nature of the groups in which they live, but the fact they have less money to spend, and so losing their money can be a considerably more serious affair. So online betting is problematic for a number of reasons. It does generate more addiction, and that's because it's very easy to keep it secret. I mentioned earlier that betting can be a social event, going to the horse races, going to a football match, going to the bookmaker's shop. Online betting is not. You sit at home, you do it on your own, you do it on your phone. Another reason online betting creates more levels of higher levels of addiction is that you have instant access to the betting and constant access at whatever time you like. You can always bet, and that indeed you can also bet from anywhere. So anywhere, anytime, and that's particularly dangerous for people who might be compulsive gamblers. You could, for example, start betting whilst you're under the influence of alcohol because you simply have your phone in the pub with you, and that's a dangerous thing. And I also mentioned earlier the fact that you have very easy access to money now on the smartphone, either to your own bank or the betting companies offering you loans to bet with. All of those things go together to make a very toxic mix. Now, the UK government is very well aware of this, but they're not really loath to do much about it. One reason I think is because they're a conservative government. They tend not to want to be seen as a nanny state, looking into people's private lives, taking decisions for people. And that no government would want to be seen as a killjoy, legislating or regulating more strictly something like gambling could be seen politically as spoiling people's fun, and every government is reluctant to do that. And finally, similarly, all governments are reluctant to regulate gambling if it means a reduction in their tax revenue, and gambling does generate an awful lot of tax. However, gambling, and particularly gambling addiction, is a health issue and needs to be dealt with as such. So I would call on the government to do more than it has done so far, and to draft serious regulations tightening up access to online gambling, particularly for younger people between 18 and 24. It should be completely banned to people under 18, as offline gambling is, but we need to tighten that up as well. And then I would ask the government to take action as soon as possible, because this is turning into a real scourge.